And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. Today we have an awesome guest here. He is a former vet, a father, as well as a guitarist for a little band you might know called Three Doors Down. Chris Henderson, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you know, it's super interesting. A lot of things always happen. You know, you try to reach out to these people who are kind of like, let's get certain people on the show. And I posted something on TikTok, and then you responded to it quite a while ago. I posted on Instagram, actually, and you responded to it. And I was kind of like, hey, this is really cool. And then you start kind of diving into things, and it's really exciting to just kind of reach out and see if we can get certain people on. But I think that you have a great story, and I want to kind of talk about that a little bit. You know, most people see you as this, you know, this successful guitarist of a band, but they don't know, you know, a lot about your story. Can you tell us a little bit kind of about like where you grew up and your childhood and you know, how you got into guitar?
Yeah. So my childhood, I'll start right from the beginning, but I started, let's see, pretty rough childhood, to be honest with you. It wasn't really the greatest childhood that people could probably imagine, but, you know, so my parents divorced. I was really young. My dad left when I was 3, something like that. I didn't really see the guy again until, I don't know, maybe 12, 13. So he was out of the picture. My mom was a career student. So she's got a degree in law, a degree in business, a degree in music, you know, all these different degrees. She just went to school the whole time I was growing up. And so I had a brother. His name was Edward. And he, for lack of a better term, has like a photographic memory. He can remember all these things. He reads all these different things. And he got into music, started learning to read music, and just basically, you know, from the fact that our parents were doing what they were doing, I guess he went straight into music as hard as he could. I went straight into everything but that as far as playing. And so I grew up, you know, on the wrong side of the tracks, if that makes sense. Started getting into a lot of trouble. Wasn't really doing. I was playing guitar a little bit. I started playing guitar around 6, but I really didn't. You know, I'd play for a day or two and put it in the closet, if that makes sense, and just go about my life. I didn't really start playing until around 13 when I got kicked out of my mom kicked me out of her house and sent me to live with my dad, who had, like I said before, I didn't know the guy that well, but my dad lived in Montana, and it was the middle of winter.
Oh, dang. So
it was me and a guitar. It was a Flying V from Sears and Roebuck's, I think, was where my mom got it from, and a boombox, like a cassette player that I could plug my guitar into. It sounded like shit. I mean, it was horrible.
But that sounded good back in the day, right?
No, it did not.
Didn't at all.
I couldn't mimic any of the sounds that I was trying to mimic. I couldn't figure out the distortion. I couldn't figure out anything on the guitar, and I had a book. It was a Mel Bay Guitar Method 1. And I remember when I was 6, I took a lesson, and the guitar teacher told me how to hear. You know, she didn't teach me how to hear it. I could just hear it. But in between the notes, when they're not in tune, there's these beats that they wobble, wobble, wobble. They kind of wobble, wobble, wobble. And as you get them in tune, they slow down, and then they stop, right?
Yeah.
And that's when the strings are in tune. So she showed me how to tune the guitar just to ear, and then how to read the notes on the first string and how to count, you know, 4/4, 2/4, 3/4, all the different time signatures, just in that one lesson. And it was just basically in the book I could just read. So I was like, well, I don't need to go back to her. So I started teaching myself to read music in Montana. I had nothing but time on my hands because I didn't have any friends. My dad and it was very remote where we lived. We lived in a cabin on the side of a mountain, and it was just me and lots of time, man. And I started banging out, you know, like these weird little tunes that were in this book, because all I had, and I had 2 records. I had Queensryche, Warning, and Iron Maiden, Power Slave. Only 2 tapes I had. But I say tapes, it was cassettes back then.
Yep.
And so I just sat and tried to learn every little piece of those for about a year. And I just, you know, literally woodshedded because I lived in a fucking woodshed.
Was it kind of like buried in the snow too? Was there a lot of snow up there? Because I know that I'm in Idaho, so Montana's, you know, a little bit east, but there's a lot of snow over there.
I never saw the ground, man, really. I mean, until spring and summer, but it wasn't that long, and it started snowing again up there, man. I lived in a place called Swan Lake. It's between Big Fork and Kalispell.
Uh-huh.
So it's like way up there, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm from, man, I mean, you hear my voice. I'm not from Montana.
Right.
So it was culture shock for me.
Yeah. Where were you? You were in, is it Mississippi or Tennessee? Where were you at when you were younger before you moved in with your dad?
Well, so I was actually born in Maryland.
Maryland. Okay.
And I lived in Maryland until I was about 13. Well, my mom moved to Florida to go to law school. Or I forget what school she was going to down there. She moved to Florida to go to some school, and so I went with her. As soon as I got to Florida, man, I was right in trouble with the cops again. I'd already had a couple felonies, you know, as a juvenile. Like I said, you know, the stuff I went through as a kid, which I don't go into many details with that. A lot of that's really that'd be for a different show.
Sure.
But the stuff that I went through, man, like it just like, what did you think was going to happen? You know, I turned into a pretty rough child. A lot of fighting, and you know, really didn't do very well in school until high school because I started turning things around. Around Montana, you know, because it was a lot of time just like inside here. Right. You know, I didn't have like I said, didn't have any friends at home at all. None. My dog. Yeah. I don't even think my dog liked me that much. So just spent a lot of time by myself, and I started to figure things out, I think, without being taught, because my parents, my dad's passed away. I don't want to say many bad things about him, but he didn't teach me many things about what you should be teaching kids. You know what I mean? He kind of like left me to my own devices.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you learned how to play guitar kind of after that, and then you did you go to high school in Montana? Is that kind of where you ended up going to high school, or?
No. So I went back to Mississippi and went to a junior high called Ed Mayo. And Ed Mayo was about, I'd say 94% black, about 6% white. It's in a town called Moss Point, and it's a predominantly black town. And I lived on the outskirts of that town, and I went to that school and played football there. Okay. Made a lot of great friends, man, and learned a lot of different things and picked up some different flavors of music. Because at that time, I already did that year in Montana where I played guitar, so I was kind of okay at it at this point. People knew me as a guitar player in the ninth. It was in the 9th grade, and they knew like that's the guy that plays guitar. So I had gotten that good at least, where people knew. And I met a couple guys there. That, you know, a couple blues guys, one blues guy in particular became real good friends with me. And we just started, you know, riffing back and forth and hanging out pretty much constantly all day long. There's another kid there that played drums. His name's Greg, and he was a really good drummer for a 9th grader. And we started kind of like, you know, trying to play songs and trying to put songs together and play things, and a lot of Skinner and a lot of stuff like that. And it was Mississippi. I lived in a remote place again, and I had a lot of time. So I sat and I played guitar, man. And I played guitar from the 9th grade till the time I joined the Navy as 18. I played guitar every single day.
How much did you play when you were younger? Was it like, you know, you'd get home from school and you'd be playing, or did you take your guitar with you to school and stuff, or what was that like?
Well, man, I got to be honest with you. So there's a part of this story that you're not going to believe that it's going to, and you're not going to believe how I did it, because I don't know how I really did it, but I just did. So, my dad was married to a, for lack of a better term, a religious tyrant. She was, Jehovah's Witness, you know, and I mean, not a one that you hear about, like knocking on your door, not one of those. She was like a fundamentalist. And so There was no music, there was no dancing, there was no TV, there was no books, there were no, any of this stuff. You know what I mean? Like rock and roll, fuck you, man. You couldn't, no way. It's not going to happen. Not in my house. And, I grew up in that house. And so I had to take my music elsewhere. Okay. So I learned to play guitar at friends' houses, and I literally dropped my guitar off at a buddy's, and I was like, "Hey, man, you know, can I leave this here? Because I'm pretty sure I'm going to lose this at some point." I was afraid that she's going to take my guitar from me. Uh-huh. So I left it at a friend's house, and so every single day I'd get up in the morning, and I had my chores to do. If I wanted to get to my guitar, I had to do these lists that she'd make, these lists of chores for me to do around the house, and at first I resented it, but because I had to do all this stuff to get to my guitar, and I hated to have to do that. But it installed a work ethic in me that I think helped me become a better player, because I worked really hard, because she was really strict and about not only about like the rules of my life, but like how I did those chores. Like she would come back and check behind me every single thing she asked me to do or told me to do. And if it wasn't done right, man, the next day was a rough day. And so I did shit right. And that's how I got out of there. And I'd do my chores, boom, hit the road. And
so do you think that like that kind of put, I played sports in high school, and that was kind of what made me have that work ethic, like the timing of, being on time, doing the things that you're supposed to do, following direction, yes, sir, yes, ma'am type of thing. Do you think that kind of helped you, along the way, kind of get that structure that you were missing when you were younger?
I think it did, man. But, it was like I said, it was never like taught to me. No one ever said, hey, this is how you do life. This is how this is how you get out of bed in the morning. No one ever said anything to me about any of that. They just basically, shoved these pieces of paper in my face and walked away and expected me to do everything and get it all done. And I kind of learned how to put that together. And so I lived like 9.5 miles away from my high school, where I went to high school. And I played high school football. And man, I played it, and I dedicated my life to it. To the weight room, everything, and played at a really again. The high school I went to was about, it wasn't as the white and the black kids. There was more white kids at the high school, but the football team was a lot of black kids and just a few white kids. And I loved it, and I rode my bike to school for 2-day practices. So 9 miles.
Yeah.
Twice a day, so that's 18 miles, eat a little bit, get back on your bike, boom, another 9 miles, and then another 9 miles. And I did that every year. And my coaches, man, like I wasn't the greatest football player of all time, but my coaches noticed that I did that. And I never went in and told them and said, hey, coach, I ride my bike to school every day and come to 2 days, riding all these miles. I never mentioned it to them. I just did it. And I never missed a practice ever, always at practice. And it wasn't because I loved football practice, because, man, it's Mississippi. It's hot, and it was tough, and it was hard, man. But I just didn't want to be at my house.
It was an
escape. I just didn't want to be home. Yeah. And so football season, baseball season, and in between sports, I played guitar. But everything I did away from my home. I just got out of there as quick as I could. And every single day. And I did that my whole childhood and until the day I left. And I spent as little time at home as I possibly could and played guitar and played sports. And, I knew that football wasn't going to work out for me, the next level, because I'm only 5'10", and I was a middle linebacker for a couple years. That didn't, I wasn't as good at middle linebacker as I was at offensive line. So my coaches were like, we want to move you from defense to offense. You got to learn all these plays now and all that good stuff. And so I started studying football, and I did it, man. And I went from middle linebacker, a third string middle linebacker, to first string center, and started for 2 years. And really appreciated like that move. I didn't like it at first. I was kind of sick to my stomach because I was a defensive player, and there's a lot of glory in defense and not much on the offensive line, but I did it, man, and I'm glad I did.
It's funny. I was an offensive tackle, and I played center a little bit in middle school, but it was that's a tough position. That's a tough one to learn, man. Anyway. Yeah. But I could play both ways, right? So I played offensive tackle, and then I played defensive tackle, but I don't know why. I just had this love for offense, and it's kind of weird because it's an unforgiving, and people don't put a lot of stress on, hey, that's one of the best positions in the whole team. You just don't hear about it. They just don't give you any glory.
No,
So,
and one of the things that I think that they fail to mention about the offensive line especially is the amount of technique it takes for you to just be not to just be on the field, but in order to maneuver and to block someone, to stay on your feet blocking someone who's really strong and doesn't want to be blocked.
right.
You have to you know what I mean? Like everything has to be working. Like you can't be slew-footed. You have to be everything's got to be straight. It takes a lot of mechanical practice and a lot of long hours of doing really weird things to be able to play those positions. And and like I said, I think it really helped me later in life being able to do that.
Well, they always call you a big dumb lineman anyway. It's like that's all you do. But guess what? Without us, there's no you.
Man, I know, and I'm sitting here remembering 75 different blocking schemes, and being the center, I couldn't it wasn't just me. I had to know everybody.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I had to know where you were going to be, and I had to know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. That's the hardest part about that. It's like not only that, you got to snap the ball too, and hope that you get that clean, and then do your job.
Yeah, right. I tell you what I did. I just tried to break that dude's hands.
Yeah, exactly.
Try to give it to him as hard as I could.
So after high school, you headed off to the Navy.
I did,
yes.
What
gave you the idea to do that? I mean, I know, and I'm grateful for all of our veterans. I was a chicken shit. I didn't want to go anywhere. After I graduated high school, the war in Iraq broke out. It was, I was doing everything I could to not go there. But there's people like you that I really appreciate the fact that you go out and you willing to do that. What kind of drove you that way?
Well, a lot of it was my parents, I think. My dad was in the Air Force. My grandfather was and my grandfather was a war hero. You know what I mean? He was decorated, the Navy, the Navy Flying Cross. He was all this stuff. He was the CO of the test pilot school. He was an enlisted man that went officer and became a captain, one of the only ones that did. And flew PBYs and was in Pearl Harbor, all these different things this guy did. And so I always had my grandfather kind of in my head throughout. He died when I was really young, so I didn't really know him that well. But just through family and people talking, and my grandfather basically became my hero in childhood, just because he was an implied hero, because I never really knew him that well. I made something of that in my head, and it gave me something to look up to, and I wanted to be like that. I wanted to serve my country, and so that was always an option for me. But I also wanted to go to college, but like I said, I didn't have anyone teaching me that there's a path to college that you have to take. There's certain things you have to do, and certain tests you have to take, and certain grades have to be met, and it takes what do they call them, people in the school system that I never really got to talk to, the counselors, the career counselors.
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Where the hell was I didn't have any of that in high school. I was just basically flying by my own, on my own. And so when I graduated, I hadn't done any of those things or prerequisites to go to school. So that wasn't going to be an option. And I don't think that, and I mean, I'd have figured it out, but it just wasn't an option. So
it's definitely interesting how things are today in school. Cause I was before what I do now, I sell window coverings. I'm a window covering salesman by day. Right. But I was a PE teacher for 4 years, and I was in the high school education system, and they take days to administer the SAT. They take days to administer, what's the exam they take for the military? I can't even remember. I've lost on
ASVAB.
it right now. The ASVAB. They take a day to.
Yeah, I took that one.
Yeah. So they take days to administer that stuff. And, when I was in high school, that didn't happen. It was you had to, I lived in Ontario, Oregon, which is 60 miles away from where I live in Boise right now. And I had to drive to Boise to go take the SAT and the ACT. And it's they didn't do that there. It's way different now than it was then. So.
Yeah, they didn't do it when I was growing up either. I didn't even know what the SAT was. And so I applied to the University of Tampa. And I was going to try to play football there. And there was a first-year football team. And, I mean, like I said, I was a good player, but I wasn't really big. So it wasn't like I was going to go to a D1 school. But I was looking for a place to play football, to go to the next level. And that was an option for me, to play football there. But then there was this test that I hadn't taken. And I was like, wait a minute. So I got to take a test to come play football. But apparently you did. So that didn't happen. So I'll come back to the Jehovah's Witness thing a little bit. So, Jehovah's Witnesses, no birthdays, no none of that stuff. So I never really got anything for my birthday growing up, except right around April and May is when you graduate in Mississippi. About May 26th, May 27th is the last day of school every year. And my birthday is April 30th. So I say this is my birthday present, but my dad gave me an envelope that had a $20 bill in it. And every recruiter card, the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, you know what I mean? And he was basically saying, hey, you did it. You graduated high school. It's time for you to go somewhere. Here's a bus fare or whatever it is you do with this 20, and here's where you need to go. And so I went and I saw the Army first. And the Army, I took the ASVAB, scored, whatever everybody scores on that thing. I scored well. The Army wanted me to become, I forget what the MOS was going to be, but it was going to be a field. It wasn't going to be a specialized job. And I wanted I wanted to be trained. I wanted to be trained. I wanted to come out of the military with something because I felt like I was bringing something to them, which is weird. A lot of kids just sign on the dotted line and go do whatever, but I wanted specific. But what I mentioned earlier is I had some felonies as a kid, some burglaries and some different things that, that kids do. Kids like me did. But I had turned this whole thing around. Like I went from not being able to go to school to being pretty much a straight A student in high school. So I went to school every day, never missed a day, never missed practice because, like I said, I didn't want to go home.
Didn't want to be home.
Didn't want to be home. So I went to school and I did. And while I was there, I was like, shit, I might as well do this. And so I applied myself, man. And I did really well. Graduated with honors. So I went to the Army and the recruiter was like, well, since you've got these felonies, there's about 5 things you can do. And they all pretty much, have to do with being shot at. And I was like, man, I can do that. I guess I could go learn to be infantry or whatever it is you want me to do. But let me just ask around. So I went to talk to the Air Force. Air Force said no, that because of my felonies. The Coast Guard also said no. I was thinking about my grandfather's in the Navy, and I was like, well, let me go talk to the Navy recruiter. And I went to the Navy guy's office, and dude, man, he was such a cool guy, and he was a CB, and he basically said, hey, man, let's pick some jobs. These are the things that you qualify for, and we will put it in writing that you will do this job, and you will go here, and you will do this. And so I joined the Navy, and I signed up to be a support equipment technician, which is if you ever, you go to the airport and you sit on the plane, all the little trucks and little cars and things that ride around the airplanes. Yep. That's those are support equipment. And so there's air conditioning, there's hydraulic systems, there's all these things because they hook these things to the airplanes and do all the testing of all the systems while the plane's on the ground. Well, I worked on all of those things. Yeah. And the school was, there's 31 weeks, I think. Or maybe I'm lying. It was long. It was a long school, but I went to gasoline, diesel, engine school, transmission, so car transmissions, electrical, basic electronics, and circuits. So I was able to what they called component repair, like taking resistors and transistors and other solder boards. Right. So troubleshooting solder boards and what else was it? It was cryogenics. So, I learned so much stuff, and I went and I did that job in the Navy, and it was so many things to learn that I never stopped learning. I was just always learning, and in books. And I spent 4 years active duty. And during that 4 years, not only did I learn how to fight in bars and stuff like that, but I also took those 4 years to learn different things. So I taught myself 3-phase electricity, motor rewinding, stuff like that, generator repair, basic residential and commercial electricity. I read a lot of books, and I started taking these tests that the Navy would administer these tests to you for free. And if you passed them, you got that qualification. So I started qualifying to do different things.
Where's your guitar through this whole thing? Where's it at?
Every day.
You were still playing.
Yeah, every day. And the thing about me was I didn't know what to practice. So I never had someone going, hey, this scale, this is that, this is the key of this. It was just me and Metallica and me and Megadeth and me and just my friends and just playing, putting a tape in and trying to learn it. Yeah. That's how I learned. And I did it every single day. And and the whole time in the Navy, and and I was in 90. I went in 89, got out in 93, off active duty. Didn't really get out until way later. But that the first Gulf War broke out then, and so a lot of the training a lot of the things I was doing when that happened stopped, and the Navy was like, "Hey, we need you to do this now." So I went and I did some. I went to basically the Military Police Academy, and but it wasn't one that I went to. They set it up on the base that I was on, and they had some Marines come in, and these Marines taught us, some weapons and some combat things and some different things, law enforcement type stuff, and some small team tactics stuff, which I was like, wow, this is really cool. I like this. I like this kind of like this specialized thing that I'm getting, and I learned how to tear down and clean and put back together 45s and what they had back then, M16s. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I started learning kind of weapons and things like that, and how to operate and how to shoot. But not only how to shoot properly, and how to, the different techniques it takes to become a shooter, and all the things. Right. Like I was talking about football. There were all these different things that you had to body positioning and feet. And I respond to that. I love that kind of stuff. So that I was into that, and I wanted to go and do that now somehow. Yeah. So my focus started shifting a bit from becoming the best all around, most knowledgeable kind of like handicrafts guy that I could possibly be, to now being something, some combat guy that I wanted to be, but really just wanted to be a cop.
Yeah.
So, but they don't really hire lots of cops with felony convictions. So I didn't really know how it was going to work, but the Navy didn't mind. And so I became a police officer, basically, which was really fun. I loved that work. It was really cool. I enjoyed it.
So how long did that go, and when did you get out of the Navy? What year were you out of the Navy?
Got out off active duty in 93, and I did 2 years in the stupid Army. God, it was horrible. It was it wasn't really the Army. It was the National Guard, or the, what do you call it? Yeah, the Mississippi National Guard. Okay. And I was in an engineering battalion. I went to Navy dive school at the end of my first 4 years of school. I met this guy's a SEAL, and he was like, "Hey man, we're going to be working out on the beach and doing all this SEAL stuff if you want to join." And like I said, I told you I love that shit. So I started working out with this guy, and applied to EOD assistant, which is, I don't know, the EOD or bomb technicians, but I didn't have enough. You have to be E5 or above. I was only E4. So I had to apply for the underling, but I still would go to dive school and become a diver. And that's what I wanted to kind of do. And then I applied for EOD assistant and second class diver. And the packages and the way that you do that takes a really long time. It's like a 9 or 10 month process. You have to take these physical tests and lots of written tests and stuff. And had to go see these diver detailers and had to go meet all these different people. And it took a really long time. And but I got it, and I got accepted to second class dive school. So right at the end of my first 4 years of active duty, I went to this school. And when I got there, I just kind of was like, do I want to do just this for the rest of my life? Like, do I want to be a diver for the rest of my life? Because that was about what was about to happen.
Right.
If I graduated that school, the Navy was going to require another 4 years of active duty, and I was going to be whatever they wanted me to be. And
right.
Thought about it. I was like, you know what? There might be other opportunities out there for me. And I'm playing guitar. I'm still playing every day. So I went to there's a detailer at that dive school, and I went to him and I told him the truth. I was like, man, I'm thinking that maybe this isn't what I want to do. And he's like, hey, no problem. He's like, why don't you take a weekend? I'll give you a Friday off. He goes, go home and just kind of think about it. So I went home and applied for a job in a shipyard as a helper. Ingalls Shipbuilding. And I went on an interview that Monday. I applied for the job on Friday, went for my interview on Monday, and I sat down in front of that guy, and he started asking me questions, and I just started, telling him about all the stuff I learned in the books. And he was like, man, I'm not going to hire you as a helper. He's like, I'll hire you as a first-class electrician. So I was basically the youngest first-class electrician that he had ever hired, because I was like barely 21, 22.
Yeah.
And this is a journeyman position, like people with 12 years experience. And I had none of that. I didn't know what the fuck this guy was talking about. He was going to hire me as a first class. And I went home and told my dad. My dad was like, are you crazy? So you can't do that job. He's like, you're gonna tear something up out there. So, but I did it, man. I showed up on the first day as a first class electrician, not knowing anything about what was going on out there and like shipbuilding and how things really worked. And the ship electricity is different, right? Because they split everything in half. So it's 55 here, 55 here, and you're standing on the ground. So the ground is the ship. So anytime you touch something, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
So you got to be doubly careful because 55 volts will kill you too.
Yeah.
But I went in there blind, man. I didn't know anything about it, and like my supervisor, he realized after about a week that I wasn't supposed to be there, and he pulled me off to the side, and he said, "Hey, man," he's like, "I don't know how you got this job." He's like, "But you did." He's like, "But I'm going to give you about another I'll give you 25, 30 days to learn, and then I'm going to have to let you go." And so I was like, "Fuck, man. I got to figure this out." So I started like staying after and going in a little bit early and talking to people and asking lots of questions. And I learned how to do that job, man. And taught myself marine electricity on my feet with a hammer and at that time in the shipyard, there was an opportunity to become a combination so I could learn how to weld. So I learned how to weld. And basically I'd go into these compartments on these ships and put all the lights up and then wire them, and then put all the receptacles up and wire them, and all the switches up and wire them. So it's a pretty cool job. I liked it.
That is so awesome. Like you think about the lost art of being a jack of all trades. Like my dad could do pretty much anything, and it's amazing. And I try to learn whatever I can from him, but he, motors and cars, building things, we put countertops in his house. I mean, there's all these things that are skills that we don't teach anymore because they don't even have those classes in school. It's stupid.
Right. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. They took VOTEC out, and I didn't even do VOTEC. I did VOTEC in the Navy, basically, which was. But man, I tell you, that job in that shipyard, I hired in. I can't remember the exact date, but within a year and a half, I was what they call a lead man. So I was right under my supervisor in my crew, and my supervisor was about ready to retire. So he just stopped showing up to work, pretty much.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. And the next thing I know, I'm this crew supervisor. But no one in the shipbuilding, like the administration side, knew it. They knew I was a lead man. They didn't know that they didn't know that my supervisor wasn't showing up. He was on salary, so he was just like, I guess whatever they did, and then go home.
Yeah,
and leave it to me. So it was a pretty fun job, and I went from there. All right, so while I was there. They started talking about layoffs or laying off a bunch of people. So I applied for the fire department, the Moss Point Fire Department, with the town I lived in, and I got the job. Actually, got the job. Became a firefighter. Was there about 6 months. Wasn't there very long, and that's the only job I ever was asked to, like. They didn't like come in and go, "Hey, you're fired," but the guy like let me go. He thought that. And he's probably right. I don't even know. He thought that I was such a hard sleeper that I wouldn't hear the fire phone go off. The fire phone was just really low. Yeah. Right. And I was a kid, you know what I mean? I was 22 years old. So I was doing all the things kids do. I was staying out too late. I was drinking way too much, and I was playing in a rock band. At this point, I started playing in a band called The Union with Todd, our Three Doors bass player.
Okay.
And a couple friends from high school. And we were doing bar gigs and staying out, we're partying, man, and doing it right. Yeah. But I was still trying to do a career change into this, into this field that was totally new to me. Medicine, the medical part of it, the first responder, the EMT, doing IVs and all these different things that I was going to be learning to do would have been a completely different trade that I'd ever done in my entire life. I'd never given a shot. I'd never done any of these things, and I was about to learn. And that scared the shit out of me. But I was going to do it. You know what I mean? I was just going to do it. And, but so about 6 months into that, the chief came and he's like, "Hey man, I'm going to have to let you go." And he's like, "I'm really sorry. I don't want to, but I have to." And I was like, "All right, man, whatever. I get it. You guys think I'm a hard sleeper." I mean, it was rough because like I had, in the shipyard, I made like back then, it was like $15 an hour, I think back then, which was a lot of damn money.
A lot of money. Yep.
Yeah, and I went from 15 to 8 to $8 an
Ooh.
hour to take the firefighting job. So I cut my pay in half. And I mean, I was
Right.
struggling financially. And this guy was getting ready to let me go. So yeah. So anyways, but that led me to my next job, which led me to to Three Doors. But so Todd and I played in this band called The Union, and the singer of that band, his name is Sean, super nice guy, decided one day that he was the songwriter, he was the guy, he was gonna, no one else was ever as dedicated as he was, so he was going to quit and go to Nashville to become a songwriter. So that band broke up, and we had some good times and played some big ass shows as a local band, and had written some songs that, to be fair, that I didn't write them, but I was just kind of like in the band. The songs were already written when I got there, but they were good songs, man. And I think that band had a shot to actually do something. It felt like it did, and but it broke up, and that led. So Todd went back home. He lived in Escataba. I lived in Moss Point, but I moved to Escataba. So Todd went back to Escataba, and that's when Three Doors started. That was around probably 94, 95. Like Three Doors started. It was Matt Roberts, Brad Arnold, and then Todd Harrell. And they had another cat. Can't remember his name. He didn't last long. He's a little dickhead. Ended up like taking trying to sue us years later for songs that he had fucking nothing to do. He tried to sue us for a Local H song. Remember that Local H, that band?
Local, yeah,
from Chicago.
Sounds familiar.
It was in the early '90s, but they had a really big song, and this kid was suing us for that other band song because it was a song that Three Doors covered in there, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I wrote that song." What an idiot! Anyways,
yeah.
But that's how that happened, and so I joined a band called Burning Bridges, and Burning Bridges, from the Union to Burning Bridges, was they were different. It was kind of progressive, the musicians type stuff, like not anything anyone wanted to hear really, but it was really fun to play. And they had the reputation around town as being the old musician guys, and I went right there and joined that band. Had a lot of fun, man, and I learned how to I learned how to play with technical people, because the first band was just banging around on a guitar. It was just, it was easy, bouncy rock and roll. This band was not like that. It was a lot different. I had to really apply myself to play in this band. And I did. And like I said, I was still playing guitar every day, even then. And I carried my guitar with me in my car. So anywhere I had time to sit down and practice, I would. I'd sit down and just play for an hour here and there. And other people's houses mostly. That's how I'd always done it. Even as a kid, like I told you before, I always played somewhere else, never at home. And I'm still like that. I still don't play where I live. I go somewhere else to play. Now, it's kind of weird, but I keep doing it.
Old habits die hard, right?
yeah, they do. But so Brad and Matt and Todd, they kicked this other guy out, so they became a three-piece. And the first song I ever heard them play, I was at Todd's trailer in Escataba, man, and I was always there because we were all best friends. And I was at Three Doors' first practice, and I was at their last practice. So so I've been around them a long time, and I've always known them. And I went to school with Brad's sisters, and me and Todd, I lived with Todd. We played junior high football together at Magnolia, and all through high school. So I've known him my whole life. But Life on My Own was written, and I heard that, and I was like, Jesus, man, like that is that's a good song. Like I could feel it in my bones. And it wasn't long after that Loser was written, and Kryptonite was written. And I mean, like within a couple of weeks, this was boom, 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 boom. These are like three of the biggest songs of an era. The Life of My Own wasn't a single, but if it would have been, it would have been a good one. But Loser and Kryptonite, like Kryptonite was number one at pop, rock, alternative, and whatever else there was back then, all at the same time. It had never been done in the history of music by anybody. And that song, that song was written by Brad in algebra class. He was 16.
Yeah.
And
it's just amazing.
Nuts?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I didn't realize this until a couple days ago, so I feel like kind of a jackass, but he played the drums and sang at the same time. How was that? Was that an interesting thing? Because you don't see that very often. It happens, but it's not a common thing.
You know what, though? But it really, he was really good at it, man. And so as a guitar player, I've played with many different drummers. across my life, there's this thing that drummers have or they don't have, right? They either got it or they don't, no matter how good they are. And Brad had it, and it was just kind of like this laid-back pocket that he had, and the one was always where it was supposed to be, but the groove was always where it was really supposed to be. So you didn't have to worry about the drums at all. No matter what he did, it was going to be okay. All right. Yeah. And other guys that are better drummers that don't have that feel, it's kind of like you're playing with them, and you got to kind of like make it feel good to play. And man, I hated guys like that. And there's a lot of them out there. Brad is definitely one of the few drummers that have him and Greg and one other guy. I'm not going to mention his name. Fuck him. But Brad and Greg, man, they have this unbelievable pocket, and just what happens is everything that you're supposed to hear, you hear, and everything that you're not supposed to hear just disappears, and you get what you need, and you're able to do your job to completely. And it's a beautiful thing. Brad had that, and he could sing and do it at the same time, which was crazy. Yeah. And he wasn't a technical drummer. Wasn't like, rudimentary and all these things that these guys do. He wasn't that. He was just good and just really good and could sing. And so the first record, The Better Life, the one that came out 2 years ago yesterday, Brad played the drums on that record, and he played them to tape. And so there's no beat detective. There was no there was none of that stuff that we have today. It wasn't electronic. Right. We did that at 2.5-inch tape at Ardent. Everything on that record you heard, we played in a take, or maybe the 20th take, but we did it. You know what I mean? And so that was really cool. I'm glad and that was probably one of the last records besides the Foo Fighters guys that are doing everything to tape now that was done to tape, because it was mixed on Pro Tools. So it went from 2.5-inch tape onto a hard drive, and Toby Wright mixed it in the Pro Tools and then put it back on tape.
Right.
Which is
that's crazy. You brought up the Foo Fighters, because Dave Grohl's one of those guys too that he plays a lot of the drum beats on his. I'm surprised he didn't sing. Well, I know the first album they did, it was the same thing. Like he sang, he played the bass, he played the guitar, he played the drums. It's a lost art.
It's one of those guys, man. One of those guys. And, and to do it to tape, because tape, everything's punched. So they have to you'll see the engineers, man, they'll be sitting on the board like this and listening to the beat. And Pro Tools, man, everything is just all right, man, here, let's just do it again. Boom. All right. Well, all right, man, I tried. One more time. Boom, boom. Okay, I got it. And then that guy can just take what you just did those 2 times and edit right there, real time on the screen, and put it perfect and be like, boom, all right, that one's done. Now, if that part ends up anywhere else in the song, then you can just grab it and put it there. So now you've done the whole song in 30 seconds, and it takes a bit of the challenge out of it, man. It's not challenging anymore. You can accidentally do something really, really cool and, have it become a integral part of a song. It didn't exist. And I don't know. I like the tape and but I also like Pro Tools. I mean, I can definitely taught myself how to run Pro Tools.
All right, everyone. Until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.